The forensic pathologist's gloved hand hovered over the frozen shoulder blade, barely visible beneath a crust of January ice, as the metal probe confirmed what the Corex had suspected for 3 days. Tissue degradation patterns inconsistent with the blizzard timeline, meaning she had been dead long before the snow fell. If you like stories like this, make sure to subscribe and like the video. The body was discovered on January 4, 1998, in a shallow ravine approximately 2 miles east of Duluth, Minnesota, where the Superior hiking trail cuts through dense pine forest before descending toward the lakeshore. A pair of cross-country skiers had veered off the main path during the post-holiday weekend, drawn by what they initially mistook for a discarded mannequin partially obscured by snowdrift. The temperature that morning registered -12 degrees Fahrenheit. Wind chill made it feel closer to -30. By the time the St. Louis County Sheriff's Department arrived, the scene had been compromised by footprints, though the skiers had been careful enough not to touch anything once they realized what they were looking at. The victim was a young woman, later identified as 22-year-old Jennifer Marie Brookstone, a recent graduate of the University of Minnesota Duluth, who had been reported missing on December 27, 1997, 8 days before her body was found. Jennifer had last been seen leaving her part-time job at a seasonal gift shop in Canal Park, a tourist-heavy district along the Duluth waterfront known for its boutique stores, restaurants, and historic lift bridge. She had worked the closing shift on December 26th, the day after Christmas, a time when the post-holiday sales brought a final surge of shoppers before the long Minnesota winter settled in for good. Her manager, a woman named Carla Ostberg, remembered Jennifer clocking out at approximately 9:45 in the evening. The shop had been understaffed that night due to holiday schedules, and Jennifer had stayed late to help restock shelves and reconcile the register. Carla recalled that Jennifer seemed tired but otherwise normal, mentioning plans to drive home to her apartment near the university campus, maybe watch a movie, and sleep in the next morning. She left through the rear employee entrance, which opened onto a narrow alley used for deliveries. Carla locked the door behind her. That was the last confirmed sighting. Jennifer's roommate, a nursing student named Amy Delacroix, reported her missing on the evening of December 27th after Jennifer failed to show up for a planned dinner and did not answer repeated phone calls. Amy told investigators that Jennifer had been reliable, almost to a fault, and that missing an obligation without notice was completely out of character. Jennifer's car, a 1994 Honda Civic, was found 3 days later in the parking lot of a rest area off Interstate 35, roughly 15 miles south of Duluth. The doors were locked. Her purse was inside, along with her winter coat, folded neatly on the passenger seat. Her keys were missing. There were no signs of struggle inside the vehicle, no broken glass, no blood. The location puzzled investigators. The rest area was not on a logical route from Canal Park to Jennifer's apartment. It sat along a stretch of highway that led toward the Twin Cities, a direction Jennifer had no apparent reason to travel that night. The initial investigation moved slowly. December in northern Minnesota is unforgiving, and the week between Christmas and New Year's Day is notoriously difficult for law enforcement. Staff shortages, holiday distractions, and harsh weather all contributed to delays. The Duluth Police Department coordinated with the St. Louis County Sheriff's Office, but the case lacked immediate leads. Jennifer's family, who lived in the Twin Cities suburb of Edina, drove north to assist with search efforts. Her father, a commercial real estate broker named Thomas Brookstone, hired a private investigator within 48 hours of the missing person report. Her mother, Susan, distributed flyers throughout Duluth, focusing on areas near the university and Canal Park. Local news outlets covered the story, though it competed for attention with Y2K preparations and the usual year-end retrospectives. Jennifer's face appeared on the evening news, a smiling photograph taken during her graduation ceremony the previous spring. She had shoulder-length brown hair, hazel eyes, and a small scar above her left eyebrow from a childhood skating accident. When her body was discovered on January 4th, the case shifted from missing person to homicide. The St. Louis County Medical Examiner's Office conducted the autopsy on January 6th. The official cause of death was determined to be ligature strangulation. There were no signs of sexual assault, though the condition of the body made certain forensic determinations difficult. The ligature itself had not been recovered at the scene. Bruising patterns on the neck suggested a narrow, flexible material, possibly a cord or thin rope. The time of death was estimated to have occurred between the late evening of December 26th and the early morning hours of December 27th, consistent with the timeline of her disappearance. Lividity patterns indicated that the body had been moved after death, meaning Jennifer had been killed elsewhere and transported to the ravine. The freezing temperatures had preserved some evidence but complicated others. Trace evidence collection yielded fibers, soil samples, and a single hair strand that did not match the victim. The location of the body became a focal point. The ravine was accessible by a narrow service road used primarily by forestry workers and hunters during the fall season. In winter, the road was often impassable due to snow accumulation, though tire tracks were found approximately 50 yards from where the body was discovered. Those tracks were photographed and cast, but the heavy snowfall on December 29th and 30th had obscured much of the detail. Investigators theorized that the killer had used the service road to access the ravine under the cover of darkness, deposited the body, and then retreated before the major snowstorm arrived. The isolation of the site suggested familiarity with the area. This was not a random dump site chosen in panic. It required knowledge of local terrain and an understanding of how infrequently the trail and surrounding woods were used during the winter months. Investigators began reconstructing Jennifer's final hours. The gift shop where she worked was equipped with a security camera, but the system was outdated and recorded over itself every 72 hours. By the time detectives requested the footage, the relevant period had been overwritten. However, the shop's location in Canal Park meant there were other cameras in the vicinity. Footage from a nearby restaurant showed Jennifer's car leaving the parking area behind the shops at approximately 10:03 on the night of December 26th. She was alone in the vehicle. The next confirmed sighting of her car was at the rest area on Interstate 35, where it remained until discovered by a highway patrol officer on December 29th during a routine check. The gap between Canal Park and the rest area became the focus. What had prompted Jennifer to drive south on the interstate instead of north toward her apartment? Had she been meeting someone? Was she forced off course? Detectives interviewed her friends, coworkers, and classmates. No one recalled Jennifer mentioning plans to leave Duluth that night. Her academic records showed she was scheduled to begin a graduate program in education the following fall. She had been working at the gift shop to save money and gain retail management experience. Her social life was modest but stable. She had a small circle of close friends and no known romantic relationship at the time of her disappearance. There were no financial problems, no legal troubles, no apparent conflicts that might explain her sudden deviation from routine. Detectives also examined the possibility of a random abduction. Canal Park, despite its tourist appeal, had a history of minor crimes, particularly theft and vandalism during the off-season. The alley behind the gift shop was poorly lit and relatively isolated late at night. Investigators canvassed nearby businesses, but most had closed earlier in the evening. One bar owner, a man named Derek Halloran, mentioned seeing a white or light-colored pickup truck parked in the alley around the time Jennifer would have been leaving work. He could not provide a license plate number or detailed description, but the information was logged. Pickup trucks were common in the region, used for everything from hauling firewood to navigating snowy rural roads. The forensic evidence provided limited immediate help. The hair strand recovered from Jennifer's clothing was sent to the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension Laboratory for analysis. DNA technology in 1998 was less advanced than it would become in later years, but the lab was able to extract a partial profile. The profile did not match anyone in the state or national databases at the time. The fiber evidence was similarly inconclusive, though analysts determined that the fibers were consistent with automotive carpeting, possibly from a truck or van. Soil samples taken from Jennifer's shoes matched the composition of the ravine where her body was found, but they also contained traces of clay and gravel consistent with unpaved rural roads common throughout northern Minnesota. The investigation continued through the harsh Minnesota winter, with detectives working from a cramped office in the St. Louis County Law Enforcement Center, surrounded by maps, witness statements, and photographs that documented every known moment of Jennifer Brookstone's final days. Lead investigator Detective Raymond Kohler, a 23-year veteran of the department, organized his team into specialized units. One group focused exclusively on Jennifer's personal life, constructing a detailed timeline of her activities during the month of December. Another team concentrated on the physical evidence, working closely with the forensic laboratory in St. Paul. A third group handled the growing number of tips that arrived daily through a dedicated hotline established by the Duluth Police Department. The case received significant media attention throughout January, with local television stations running regular updates and the Minneapolis Star-Tribune publishing a lengthy feature on Jennifer's life and the investigation's progress. The tip line generated hundreds of calls, most of them well-intentioned but ultimately unproductive. Callers reported seeing young women matching Jennifer's description in various locations throughout the state. Others offered theories about transient workers, out-of-state travelers, or vague suspicions about neighbors and acquaintances. Each tip was logged, evaluated, and investigated when warranted. One call, received on January 14th, came from a truck driver named Michael Peterson, who had been traveling southbound on Interstate 35 during the early morning hours of December 27th. Peterson told detectives he had stopped at the rest area where Jennifer's car was later found, sometime between 1 and 2 in the morning. He recalled seeing a Honda Civic in the parking lot, though he could not confirm the color or provide specific details. More significantly, he mentioned seeing another vehicle, a light-colored pickup truck, parked near the restrooms. Peterson had thought nothing of it at the time, assuming it belonged to another traveler taking a break. He had not seen anyone near either vehicle. This information aligned with the earlier report from the Canal Park bar owner, who had seen a similar truck in the alley behind the gift shop. Detectives began focusing more intensely on the possibility that the killer drove a light-colored pickup truck, a detail they released to the media in late January. The announcement generated additional tips, but also created complications. Light-colored pickup trucks were ubiquitous in rural Minnesota, used by contractors, farmers, hunters, and countless ordinary residents. Without a more specific description or license plate information, the lead remained frustratingly broad. Meanwhile, forensic analysts continued working with the physical evidence. The partial DNA profile from the hair strand was compared against samples voluntarily provided by individuals who had been in contact with Jennifer during her final days. This included coworkers from the gift shop, friends from the university, and even the skiers who had discovered her body. None matched. The profile was entered into CODIS, the FBI's combined DNA index system, but no hits were returned. The ligature marks on Jennifer's neck suggested the killer had used significant force and maintained pressure for several minutes. The medical examiner noted that this type of strangulation required both physical strength and a certain degree of control, indicating the killer was likely calm and deliberate rather than acting in a moment of uncontrolled rage. By early February, the investigation had begun to stall. Detectives had conducted more than 200 interviews, reviewed thousands of pages of documents, and followed every credible lead. The physical evidence, while suggestive, did not point to a specific suspect. Jennifer's car had been processed extensively, but aside from her own fingerprints and those of her roommate Amy, no unidentified prints were found. The absence of Jennifer's keys remained puzzling. Investigators theorized the killer had taken them, possibly as a trophy or to prevent identification of the vehicle. The coat left folded on the passenger seat suggested Jennifer had removed it herself, perhaps because the car's heater was working. This small detail implied she had been driving voluntarily, at least initially, and had not been forced into the vehicle under immediate duress. Detective Kohler decided to revisit the gift shop and its surrounding area. He walked the alley behind the store multiple times, at various hours, trying to understand the environment Jennifer had encountered on the night of December 26th. The alley was narrow, approximately 12 feet wide, with brick walls on both sides. Dumpsters belonging to various businesses lined one side. Lighting came from a single fixture mounted above the gift shop's rear door and a distant streetlight at the alley's entrance. At night, especially during winter when darkness fell early, the alley would have been poorly illuminated and isolated. Kohler interviewed business owners again, pressing for any detail that might have been overlooked. Most had closed by 8 or 9 o'clock that night. The bar that stayed open later, where Derek Halloran had seen the pickup truck, became a focus of renewed attention. Halloran was interviewed extensively. He was 41 years old, had owned the bar for 6 years, and lived in a small house on the outskirts of Duluth. He was cooperative but could provide little additional information about the truck. He had seen it between 9:30 and 10 o'clock, parked near the dumpsters, engine running. He had assumed someone was making a quick stop, perhaps picking up a friend or waiting for a passenger. The truck had been gone when he left the bar around 11 that night. Halloran allowed detectives to review his bar's interior and provided a list of customers who had been present that evening. Each was interviewed. None reported seeing Jennifer or anything unusual in the alley. The breakthrough came not from new evidence, but from a connection made through persistent re-examination of existing information. In mid-February, Detective Kohler was reviewing employment records for businesses in the Canal Park area when he noticed that a maintenance contractor had been scheduled to service the heating system at the gift shop on December 23rd, 3 days before Jennifer disappeared. The contractor was a local company called Superior Mechanical Services, operated by 2 brothers, Gordon and Neil Strand. The work order indicated that Neil Strand had performed the service, arriving at the shop around 4 in the afternoon and completing the job by 6. This placed him at the gift shop during operating hours, when Jennifer would have been working. Kohler obtained background information on both brothers. Gordon Strand, age 47, had a clean record aside from a single DUI conviction from 1989. Neil Strand, age 43, had been arrested in 1983 for assault following a bar fight, though charges had been dropped when the victim declined to press the matter further. Both brothers had lived in the Duluth area their entire lives. Their business was small but stable, serving commercial clients throughout St. Louis County. The company owned 3 vehicles, 2 white Ford F-150 pickup trucks and a cargo van. The coincidence of the white trucks was enough to warrant further investigation. On February 18th, detectives obtained a warrant to interview Neil Strand and examine his vehicle. Strand lived in a modest ranch house on the outskirts of Proctor, a small city adjacent to Duluth. When officers arrived, Strand was cooperative, expressing surprise at the visit but agreeing to speak with detectives. He confirmed that he had serviced the heating system at the gift shop on December 23rd. He remembered Jennifer because she had helped him access the storage room where the furnace controls were located. He described her as friendly and professional. When asked about his whereabouts on the night of December 26th, Strand stated he had been home with his wife, watching television. His wife, Corinne Strand, confirmed this when questioned separately, though detectives noted her responses seemed rehearsed and overly precise. The examination of Strand's pickup truck revealed several items of interest. The interior carpeting matched the fiber type found on Jennifer's clothing. This alone was not conclusive, as the carpeting was a common automotive material. However, technicians also discovered faint stains on the truck bed liner that tested presumptive positive for blood. The stains had been cleaned, but trace amounts remained. Samples were collected and sent for DNA analysis. In the cab of the truck, wedged beneath the driver's seat, investigators found a small silver keychain in the shape of a snowflake. Jennifer's roommate Amy identified it as belonging to Jennifer, a Christmas gift Amy had given her 2 weeks before her disappearance. The discovery of Jennifer's keychain in Neil Strand's truck provided the probable cause detectives needed to obtain a more comprehensive search warrant. On February 20th, officers executed a warrant covering Strand's home, his work vehicle, and the Superior Mechanical Services shop where company equipment and records were stored. The search of Strand's residence yielded little of immediate evidentiary value, though investigators noted an unusual cleanliness in the garage, where the concrete floor showed signs of recent scrubbing with industrial cleaning solution. Chemical residue samples were collected for analysis. In the bedroom, detectives found a collection of local newspapers from late December and early January, several with articles about Jennifer's disappearance and the subsequent discovery of her body carefully cut out and missing. The search of the Superior Mechanical Services shop proved more fruitful. In a storage cabinet in the rear office, investigators found a coil of nylon cord that matched the diameter and material characteristics consistent with the ligature marks on Jennifer's neck. The cord was a type commonly used in HVAC installations, employed for securing ductwork and ventilation components. Samples were collected and sent for comparison analysis. The shop's business records showed that Neil Strand had been scheduled to perform a furnace inspection at a commercial property in Two Harbors on the morning of December 27th, but had called in claiming illness. His brother Gordon confirmed that Neil had canceled the appointment, saying he had caught a stomach virus and would be unable to work that day. Gordon had handled the Two Harbors job himself. Neil Strand was brought in for formal questioning on February 21st. He arrived at the Law Enforcement Center with an attorney, a Duluth defense lawyer named Marcus Riley who specialized in criminal cases. The interview was conducted by Detective Kohler and his partner, Detective Sarah Lindstrom, in a small windowless room equipped with recording equipment. Strand maintained his composure throughout most of the session, repeating his earlier statements about being home on the night of December 26th. When confronted with the keychain found in his truck, He claimed he had no idea how it got there, suggesting that perhaps Jennifer had dropped it when he was working at the gift shop 3 days before her disappearance. When asked why he had cleaned his garage so thoroughly, he stated that he routinely maintained his workspace and saw nothing unusual about basic cleaning. The interview lasted nearly 4 hours. Strand's attorney objected frequently to the line of questioning, particularly when detectives pressed for details about Strand's movements on December 26th and 27th. Strand became noticeably more agitated when shown photographs of the cord found at his workplace. He insisted that such cord was generic and could be found at any hardware store in the region. When Detective Lindstrom asked whether he had ever given Jennifer a ride or spent time with her outside of the brief interaction at the gift shop, Strand paused for a long moment before answering. He said he had seen her one other time, by chance, at a gas station near Canal Park a few days before Christmas. They had exchanged pleasantries, nothing more. This detail had not been mentioned in his earlier statements. The forensic results arrived in stages throughout late February and early March. The blood found in Strand's truck bed was confirmed to be human and matched Jennifer Brookstone's DNA profile. The cord from the Superior Mechanical Services shop was consistent with the ligature marks on Jennifer's neck, though a definitive match could not be established due to the absence of the actual weapon used in the strangulation. The cleaning solution residue from Strand's garage contained traces of blood that also matched Jennifer's DNA profile. Most significantly, the partial DNA profile obtained from the hair strand found on Jennifer's clothing was compared against a sample obtained from Neil Strand through the search warrant. The profiles matched with a statistical certainty of 1 in several million. On March 9, 1998, Neil Strand was arrested and charged with the murder of Jennifer Marie Brookstone. The arrest took place at his home early in the morning, executed by a team of sheriff's deputies and detectives. Strand did not resist. His wife Karen watched from the doorway as he was placed in handcuffs and led to a waiting patrol car. The arrest generated immediate media attention. Local television stations interrupted regular programming to announce the development. The Duluth News-Tribune ran a front-page story the following morning detailing Strand's background, his connection to the victim, and the evidence that had led to his arrest. Jennifer's family released a brief statement through their attorney, expressing relief that an arrest had been made while acknowledging that no legal outcome could restore what they had lost. The case against Neil Strand was presented to a St. Louis County grand jury in late March. Prosecutors outlined the timeline of Jennifer's disappearance, the discovery of her body, and the investigative steps that had led to Strand's identification as a suspect. The physical evidence was presented in detail: the keychain, the blood traces, the DNA match, the cord, the cleaned garage. Prosecutors also presented circumstantial evidence, including Strand's canceled work appointment on December 27th, his wife's oddly precise alibi, and the newspaper clippings found in his home. The grand jury deliberated for less than 3 hours before returning an indictment on charges of first-degree murder. The trial was scheduled for October 1998, allowing both prosecution and defense teams time to prepare. Neil Strand remained in custody at the St. Louis County Jail, held without bail due to the severity of the charges and the strength of the evidence against him. His attorney, Marcus Riley, filed multiple pretrial motions challenging the admissibility of certain evidence and requesting a change of venue due to extensive media coverage. Most motions were denied. The trial was set to proceed in Duluth, at the St. Louis County Courthouse, a 3-story stone building that had served as the center of local justice for more than 70 years. The trial of Neil Strand began on October 19, 1998, In a second-floor courtroom filled with journalists, members of Jennifer Brookstone's family, and curious residents who had followed the case since the discovery of her body 9 months earlier. Judge Catherine Novick presided, a respected jurist with 18 years on the bench known for her meticulous attention to procedural detail and her insistence on courtroom decorum. The prosecution team was led by Assistant County Attorney Daniel Mayers, a methodical prosecutor who had built a reputation on careful preparation and clear presentation of complex forensic evidence. The defense continued under Marcus Riley, who faced the difficult task of creating reasonable doubt in the face of substantial physical evidence linking his client to the victim. Jury selection consumed the first 3 days of trial. The pool of potential jurors was questioned extensively about their exposure to media coverage, their ability to evaluate scientific evidence objectively, and any personal biases that might affect their judgment. The final jury consisted of 8 women and 4 men, ranging in age from 26 to 68, representing a cross-section of St. Louis County residents including a retired teacher, 2 small business owners, a nurse, a factory supervisor, and several others whose occupations and backgrounds suggested the capacity for careful deliberation. The prosecution's case unfolded over 2 weeks. Daniel Mayers began with a detailed reconstruction of Jennifer's final evening, calling witnesses who established the timeline from her departure from the gift shop to the discovery of her body 8 days later. Carla Osberg, Jennifer's manager, testified about Jennifer's routine behavior and the normalcy of that final shift. Amy Delacroix, the roommate, described Jennifer's reliability and the alarm she felt when Jennifer failed to appear as planned. The cross-country skiers who discovered the body recounted the January morning that had turned their recreational outing into a nightmare. The medical examiner presented the autopsy findings with clinical precision, explaining the ligature strangulation, the estimated time of death, and the evidence indicating the body had been moved after death. The forensic evidence formed the core of the prosecution's case. DNA analysts from the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension explained how the hair strand found on Jennifer's clothing matched Neil Strand's genetic profile. Trace evidence experts testified about the fiber analysis linking material on Jennifer's clothing to the carpeting in Strand's truck. A bloodstain pattern analyst walked the jury through the significance of the blood traces found in the truck bed and garage, explaining how the cleaning efforts had been insufficient to eliminate all biological material. The keychain discovery was presented through testimony from the detective who found it, and Amy Delacroix's identification of the item as Jennifer's property. Prosecutors also established motive and opportunity, though these elements were less concrete than the physical evidence. Detective Kohler testified about Strand's presence at the gift shop 3 days before Jennifer's disappearance, his canceled work appointment the day after she vanished, and the inconsistencies in his statements to investigators. A behavioral psychologist testified about patterns in cases involving stranger abductions, though the defense objected strenuously to this testimony, arguing it was speculative and prejudicial. The objection was sustained in part, limiting the scope of the psychologist's testimony to general observations rather than specific implications about Strand's character. The defense strategy focused on creating doubt about the prosecution's narrative. Marcus Riley argued that the physical evidence, while troubling, did not definitively prove his client had killed Jennifer Brookstone. He suggested alternative explanations for the keychain's presence in Strand's truck, proposing that it could have been transferred innocuously during the heating system service, or even planted by investigators eager to close a high-profile case. He challenged the significance of the blood traces, noting that the samples were small and that contamination during collection or analysis remained possible despite laboratory protocols. He called witnesses who testified to Strand's good character, his stable marriage, and his lack of prior violent behavior. Strand's wife Corinne took the stand, reaffirming that her husband had been home with her on the night of December 26th. Though under cross-examination she admitted she had fallen asleep before 11 o'clock and could not account for her husband's whereabouts throughout the entire night. Neil Strand himself did not testify. Marcus Riley advised against it, recognizing that the prosecution would aggressively cross-examine any statement Strand made, and that his earlier inconsistencies with investigators would be highlighted mercilessly. The decision not to testify is a defendant's constitutional right, but it often leaves juries wondering what explanation might have been offered. In this case, the absence of Strand's voice seemed to underscore the strength of the physical evidence against him. Closing arguments took place on November 4th. Daniel Mayers methodically reviewed the evidence, asking the jury to consider the totality of the facts rather than focusing on individual elements that defense counsel had attempted to cast into doubt. He emphasized the DNA match, the victim's keychain in the defendant's vehicle, the blood evidence, and the defendant's own suspicious behavior in the days following Jennifer's disappearance. Marcus Riley delivered an impassioned defense, reminding jurors of the presumption of innocence and the prosecution's burden to prove guilt beyond reasonable doubt. He urged them to scrutinize the evidence critically and to resist the temptation to convict based on emotion or public pressure. The jury began deliberations on the afternoon of November 5th. They deliberated for 11 hours over 2 days, requesting to review certain pieces of evidence including photographs of the keychain and transcripts of Detective Kohler's testimony. On the afternoon of November 6th, they returned to the courtroom and delivered their verdict. Neil Strand was found guilty of first-degree murder. The courtroom remained silent as the verdict was read. Jennifer's mother Susan wept quietly. Her father Thomas sat motionless, staring straight ahead. Neil Strand showed no visible reaction, though his wife Corinne collapsed in the gallery and had to be assisted from the courtroom by family members. Sentencing took place 6 weeks later, on December 18, 1998. Judge Novick sentenced Neil Strand to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, the mandatory sentence under Minnesota law for first-degree murder. Before pronouncing sentence, she allowed Jennifer's family to address the court. Thomas Brookstone read a prepared statement describing his daughter's kindness, intelligence, and the future that had been stolen from her. He spoke for less than 5 minutes, his voice steady but strained.